The arrival, a desperate mission. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless planets, stars, and unknown dangers. Among the many powerful species that roamed the universe, the Galactic Council stood as the supreme authority. Their job was to ensure peace and maintain order. For centuries, they had observed the many planets and their inhabitants, ensuring that no species would rise above the others and disrupt the balance. But one thing the Council had never expected was the arrival of humans on a remote and dangerous planet, one that had been avoided by all known civilizations. The planet was called HFY, a place known across the galaxy for its vicious predators. The apex predator of this world was the Tizen, a massive creature with scales as tough as steel and claws sharper than the most advanced weapons. It was said that nothing could survive in the Tizen's territory. No species had ever dared to enter its domain, let alone tame it. The very idea seemed absurd. But now, the Council had received strange reports. A group of humans had landed on HFY, and they appeared to have a plan. The Galactic Council watched from their central command, their massive council chambers filled with tense silence. Alien leaders from across the galaxy were present, all of them intrigued by the arrival of these seemingly primitive humans. They were supposed to be weak, their technology nothing compared to the advanced species that the Council governed. How could they think they had the ability to tame something as terrifying as the Tizen? A human ship, small and unassuming compared to the mighty warships of the Council, had crashed on the surface of HFY. The survivors, a handful of humans, had managed to make contact with the Council. They spoke of a mission so urgent that they were willing to risk everything. It was not just about survival, it was about something much greater. The human leader, Captain Alan Carter, had insisted that they had discovered something on HFY that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. But what could be so important on a planet ruled by such a brutal predator? The Council's curiosity grew, but so did their doubt. They had seen countless species come and go, each claiming to have discovered something that would revolutionize the galaxy. Most of those claims had ended in failure, but there was something different about this one. The humans seemed determined. In the quiet meeting room of the Council, the alien leaders exchanged uncertain glances. The chief officer of the Council, a towering figure from the planet Eron, spoke first. Why did these humans come here? To this cursed planet. The Tizen is a force of nature. It is unstoppable. The planet is lost to us. Why waste time and resources on this insignificant species? A voice from a nearby council member, a creature from the oceans of Valen, responded coldly. They may be foolish, but if they believe they contain the Tizen, they must be stopped before their arrogance brings disaster. The chief officer nodded, agreeing with the sentiment. We will observe them for now. If they succeed, it will prove that humans are more dangerous than we have imagined. If they fail, then it is simply another failed mission. On HFY, Captain Carter and his small team were preparing for what was to be the most difficult mission of their lives. They had already lost half of their crew in the crash landing, and the rest of the survivors were injured. Yet none of them faltered. They had a single goal: to tame the Tizen. The humans knew they had no choice but to succeed. A mysterious force, one far more powerful than they had ever imagined, was gathering on the horizon. They didn't have the luxury of time. This was not just a mission of survival. It was a race against an even greater threat. The humans had learned of an ancient secret buried deep within HFY's jungle, a secret that could help them defeat this growing darkness. But to reach it, they needed the Tizen. Captain Carter's team stood at the edge of the jungle, their weapons ready but their faces filled with doubt. None of them were prepared for the sight that awaited them inside. The jungle of HFY was a deadly place. Plants with toxic spores hung from the trees, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. Yet there was something else, something more terrifying. The ground trembled beneath their feet, as though something huge was moving through the jungle. Suddenly, a massive shadow fell across them. The Tizen appeared, its eyes glowing bright red, its massive body towering above the humans. It let out a deep, low growl that echoed through the jungle. Its sharp claws dug into the earth as it moved forward, ready to strike. The humans froze. They had prepared for this moment for weeks, but nothing could have prepared them for the sight of the Titan in person. It was more terrifying than any of them had imagined. But Captain Carter, his face filled with resolve, stepped forward. "We don't have time to be afraid," he said firmly. "We have a mission to complete, and we will complete it." With that, he activated the device in his hand, a strange artifact they had discovered in the depths of Typhor's caves. The device glowed with an unnatural light, and as it did, the Exizon stopped in its tracks. For a moment, it stared at the humans, its eyes narrowed, its nostrils flaring. The air was thick with tension. The Galactic Council watched in disbelief as the humans seemed to control the mighty predator. Could this really be happening? Could a group of primitive humans actually tame the most dangerous creature in the galaxy? That Exizon let out a low, rumbling sound, almost as if it were listening. It took a few hesitant steps back, its eyes never leaving the humans. For a moment, everything was still. Then, as the device continued to pulse with light, the impossible happened. The Exizon bowed its head, submitting to the human. The Galactic Council watched, stunned. They had just witnessed the impossible. The taming of the universe's deadliest predator by a species they had once considered weak. But as the humans stood victorious, they were unaware of the true danger that lay ahead. The mysterious force on the horizon was closing in fast, and their mission had just begun. The dangerous encounter. That Exizon stood motionless, its massive form towering over the small group of humans. It was a creature of nightmares, its crimson eyes glowing like molten lava, and its long claws gleaming like blades of destruction. The jungle around them seemed to hold its breath, as though nature itself feared the predator. Yet, in the face of this terrifying beast, the humans stood firm, unwilling to back down. Captain Carter, his heart pounding, glanced at his team. Every one of them was as stunned as he was, but they also understood the gravity of the situation. This was no longer just a matter of survival. This was their only chance to succeed in the mission that could change the course of history. They had come to Typhor with one goal in mind: tame that Exizon, and use it to uncover the secrets hidden deep within the planet. But could they truly control such an apex predator? Could they pull off the impossible? Carter activated the device in his hand again, the glowing artifact pulsing with an eerie light. The Exizon's eyes flickered, its head tilting slightly, as if it were sensing something unfamiliar in the air. The humans had no idea how the device worked, only that it had a strange power, one that seemed to affect the beast. For a moment, the tension in the air was unbearable. The Exizon's massive body shifted, its muscles rippling beneath its thick hide. It took a cautious step forward, its massive feet making the ground tremble. Carter didn't flinch. Instead, he took a deep breath, hoping that the device would do its job. The other humans, equally nervous but determined, remained still. Their fingers hovered near their weapons, but they knew that they would need more than just guns and knives to survive this encounter. They needed to communicate with the creature, to bond with it in a way that no one, not even the most advanced alien species, had ever managed to do. As the Exizon took another step, a strange energy filled the air. The artifact in Carter's hand began to hum louder, the light growing more intense. The Exizon paused. Its nostrils flared, taking in the scent of the humans. And then, to everyone's astonishment, it stopped. It was as if the creature was considering them. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't even growling. For a moment, the jungle was silent, the only sound the distant rustle of trees in the wind. The humans dared not move, unsure of what that Exizon would do next. Captain Carter slowly extended his hand toward the creature, holding it steady. He knew that any sudden movement might trigger an attack. The Exizon's gaze locked onto his hand, and for a moment, There was a strange understanding between them. The beast's eyes softened slightly, and its massive body seemed to relax, just a fraction. The humans couldn't believe what they were witnessing. This was it, the first step toward taming the Tizen. But Carter knew they weren't out of danger yet. The predator was still a wild force of nature, and no one could predict how long it would stay under their control. Suddenly, a loud rustling sound came from the trees behind them. The humans whipped around, their weapons raised. From the shadows emerged a group of smaller predators, creatures that resembled giant raptors, their teeth sharp and ready for a fight. These were the smaller, less deadly creatures of Cypher's jungle, but in numbers, they were still dangerous. Carter's team immediately positioned themselves in a defensive formation, ready to face the new threat. They couldn't afford to be distracted now, not with the Tizen still standing before them, its massive form just waiting for a command. They needed to keep their focus. But to everyone's shock, the Tizen let out a low growl, its enormous jaws parting slightly. It turned its head toward the approaching raptors and began to move. "Wait," Carter shouted, but it was too late. The Tizen moved like a blur, its massive claws slashing through the air with incredible speed. The raptors didn't stand a chance. Within seconds, the larger predator tore through the smaller creatures with terrifying precision, each swipe of its claws ending the life of a raptor. The humans stood frozen, their weapons still raised but no longer needed. The Tizen had defended them, as if it had decided they were its pack. It was a display of power unlike anything they had ever witnessed, and for the first time, they realized just how much control they had over the beast. Carter's heart raced. He had expected the Tizen to be dangerous, but he hadn't anticipated its loyalty. There was no doubt now. This creature could be their key to unlocking the secrets of Cypher. But the Council was watching, and they would not take kindly to this unexpected turn of events. The device in Carter's hand continued to hum, but the glow was beginning to dim. It was clear that the Tizen's cooperation wouldn't last forever. They had to move quickly. "We have to keep moving," Carter said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "The Council will be watching, and we have to stay one step ahead. Let's head deeper into the jungle and find the source of the power we came here for." The team nodded, knowing there was no turning back now. They had tamed the Tizen, but they still had a long way to go. They needed to find the ancient artifact hidden within the jungle, the one that held the key to saving the galaxy from a threat even greater than the Tizen itself. But even as they walked deeper into the jungle, Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something more dangerous was lurking just beyond their reach. They had tamed the universe's deadliest predator, but they had no idea what other dangers Cypher had in store for them. Suspense. Would the Tizen continue to obey them, or would it turn against them when they least expected it? What was the true power hidden on Cypher, and would they survive long enough to uncover it? And with the Galactic Council still watching, what would happen if they succeeded or failed? The stakes were higher than ever, and the humans had no choice but to push forward, hoping that they could control the greatest predator the galaxy had ever known. The Hidden Secrets, a dangerous journey. The jungle grew thicker as the human team ventured deeper into the heart of Cypher. The canopy above them was dense, casting the ground beneath in a dim, eerie light. The atmosphere was thick with humidity, the air heavy with the scent of ancient flora, and the sounds of creatures moving unseen in the shadows. Despite the terrifying environment, Captain Carter and his team moved with purpose, the Tizen walking silently behind them like a shadow of destruction, its massive form an ever-present reminder of their dangerous mission. The device in Carter's hand was still glowing faintly, though its light was beginning to flicker. It had been their only tool to gain the Tizen's trust, but Carter knew they couldn't rely on it forever. The Tizen, despite its apparent loyalty, was still a wild animal, and it could turn on them at any moment. Every step they took into the jungle felt like a gamble. "We need to find the artifact fast," Carter murmured, keeping his voice low but urgent. "If we don't, The council will come for us, and I'm not sure we'll survive a direct confrontation." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Tessa Morgan, nodded in agreement. "Agreed. But with the Xizon's power, we may have a chance to defend ourselves. If we can get to the artifact first and unlock its secrets, we might just have the upper hand." As they moved forward, the team began to notice signs of something more than just the jungle's dangers. Strange markings were etched into the trees, symbols that seemed to pulse with energy. They were unlike anything the humans had seen before, even with all their advanced technology. It was clear that something ancient had once lived here, something far older than the Xizon itself. "Look at this," said Dr. Nathan Zhang, the team's scientist, pointing to the symbols. "These markings, they seem to be part of a larger pattern. They're leading us somewhere." Carter followed Zhang's finger, eyes narrowing as he studied the strange symbols. There was something unsettling about them. An unnatural energy radiated from the carvings, as though the very trees themselves were alive with power. It wasn't just ancient technology they were dealing with. It was something far more mysterious, something with the potential to change the fate of the galaxy. "We need to keep moving," Carter said, though a knot tightened in his chest. The markings might lead them to the artifact, but there was no telling what they would find along the way. Xyphor's jungle was a living, breathing nightmare, and it seemed to watch them with every step they took. The team pressed on, the Xizon following in their wake, its heavy footsteps the only sound breaking the otherwise oppressive silence. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, the ground became more uneven. The terrain was rough, with jagged rocks jutting out from the earth, making their progress slow and difficult. The air grew colder, the oppressive humidity replaced by a chill that sent shivers down their spines. Then suddenly, the jungle cleared. Before them stood an enormous ancient structure, towering, covered in moss, and half hidden by the thick vegetation. The structure was massive, unlike anything they had ever seen. Its stone walls were cracked and weathered by time, yet they exuded an unnatural power. This was it, the place they had been searching for. Carter's heart raced. This was no ordinary structure. It was a temple, or perhaps a fortress, built to house something incredible. The markings they had followed now made sense, leading them straight to this ancient ruin. They had reached the source of Xyphor's dark secrets. "This is it," Carter said, his voice a whisper. "We found it. The artifact should be inside." The team exchanged uncertain glances, but there was no turning back now. They had come too far. With the Xizon by their side, they approached the entrance. The massive stone doors stood ajar, as if waiting for them. The air around them grew colder still, and a sense of unease settled over the group. Dr. Zhang stepped forward, examining the stone door. "This is unlike anything I've ever seen. These symbols, they're not just decoration. They're part of the mechanism. If we can activate them, we should be able to open the door." Carter nodded, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "Let's do it, then. We don't have much time." The team began to work quickly, matching the symbols on the door with the markings they had seen in the jungle. As they carefully aligned them, the ground beneath them trembled. The air was thick with energy, and the temperature dropped even further. Then, with a final shift of the last symbol, the massive stone door slowly creaked open, revealing the dark interior of the temple. But what awaited them inside was more than just an artifact. As the door fully opened, a strange light illuminated the chamber beyond. The walls were lined with strange statues, their eyes glowing with an eerie ancient energy. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested the artifact, shining with a faint, almost otherworldly glow. For a moment, the humans stood in awe, but their awe quickly turned to suspicion. The artifact was unlike anything they had imagined. It was not just an ancient relic, it was something much more. Its power radiated through the chamber, and as they stepped closer, the ground beneath them shifted once more. A voice, deep, resonant, and echoing from the very walls of the temple, filled the chamber. You should not have come here, the voice intoned. The humans froze. The voice was not one of a machine or artificial intelligence. It was something far older, something that seemed to be tied to the very essence of sci-fi itself. Carter's heart raced. "What is this?" he whispered. The voice continued, its tone dark and threatening. "You are not the first to seek the power of this place. Those who came before you failed, and now you will fail too." The air crackled with energy, and the temperature plummeted even further. The Axizan growled low in its throat, its massive body tense, ready to defend the humans if needed. But Carter knew this was different. They were no longer just facing the dangers of the jungle. They were standing at the edge of something far more terrifying, a force that could change the balance of the entire galaxy. Suspense. What was the true nature of the artifact? Why had previous attempts to harness its power failed? And what dark force was lurking in the depths of Typhor, waiting to strike at the humans? As the ancient voice echoed through the temple, the stakes had just gotten higher. The humans had found the artifact, but at what cost? The ancient warning. Secrets of Typhor revealed. The chamber was deathly silent after the mysterious voice echoed through the air. The humans stood frozen, their eyes darting around the room. The Axizan growled low, its senses alert, its massive form tensing as if ready to strike. It was as though the very air around them had turned heavy, charged with a malevolent energy. Captain Carter stepped forward, his pulse racing. He had faced many dangers in his career, but this was something entirely different. The voice had sounded ancient, and the warning it carried was unlike anything they had encountered before. Something about this temple, this artifact, it felt alive. And that made Carter uneasy. Did anyone else hear that? Carter asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Yes," Dr. Zhang said quietly, his eyes scanning the room. "It wasn't a machine. That voice, it's something much older. Something tied to this place. Something tied to the artifact," Morgan added, her gaze fixed on the pedestal where the object sat, glowing faintly with an unnatural energy. "But what is it? What is this power?" Carter turned his gaze back to the pedestal, his mind racing. They had come this far. They couldn't turn back now, not when they were so close to uncovering the secrets of Typhor, and perhaps the key to defeating the Galactic Council's greatest enemies. But the warning couldn't be ignored. There was something dangerous here, and if they weren't careful, it could destroy them all. He glanced at the Kaizen, still standing silently behind them. The beast hadn't moved since they entered the temple, but Carter could feel its intense presence. The creature seemed to be watching them closely, its massive eyes flickering between the humans and the artifact. It was as if the Axizan knew more about this place than they did, and that sent a chill down Carter's spine. "Stay alert," Carter said, his voice low. "Something isn't right here. We don't know what we're dealing with." Dr. Zhang moved closer to the pedestal, cautiously extending his hand toward the artifact. "I've studied ancient alien artifacts before," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "But nothing like this. It's as if it's been waiting for us." As Zhang's fingers brushed the surface of the artifact, a sudden flash of light exploded from the pedestal. The humans recoiled in shock, shielding their eyes from the blinding intensity. A deep rumbling sound filled the chamber, and the very ground beneath their feet seemed to shake. For a brief moment, Carter thought the temple was collapsing. But then, the light faded as quickly as it had come. The artifact was now glowing with a fierce brilliance, its shape shifting slightly, as though reacting to Zhang's touch. But what was most terrifying was the change that had occurred in the room. The walls, once covered in mysterious symbols, now pulsed with dark energy. The statues of ancient beings lining the chamber seemed to come to life, their eyes glowing as if watching the humans, waiting for their next move. It's reacting to us," Zhang stammered. This is no ordinary artifact. It's a living entity." Before anyone could respond, the voice filled the chamber again, louder this time, as if coming from every direction at once. "You should have heeded the warning," it said, its tone deep and foreboding. "The power you seek is not meant for mortals. The consequences will be your undoing." The air in the chamber grew colder, the temperature plummeting further until the humans could see their breath fogging in front of them. Carter's mind raced. They had just unleashed something ancient, something powerful. And now they were in the eye of a storm they couldn't control. "We need to get out of here," Morgan shouted, her hand gripping the weapon at her side, ready for anything. "This place is cursed." But Carter didn't move. Instead, he stood there, staring at the artifact. His eyes narrowed in thought. The warning had been clear, but there was something pulling him toward the object. A feeling he couldn't shake. It was almost as though the artifact itself was calling to him, urging him to understand its true power. "Wait," Carter said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "We're not leaving yet. There's more to this than just danger. The artifact is connected to something much bigger. We can't leave without understanding it." Dr. Zhang, still mesmerized by the glowing object, hesitated. "But what if we're not ready for what it holds? What if? What if we are?" Carter interjected, his voice firm. "We've come this far. We need to know the truth. We're not just going to leave empty-handed. If this artifact is connected to the Tizen, then we have a chance. If we can unlock its secrets, we may be able to control it." "But how?" Morgan asked, her voice laced with doubt. "It's already reacted to Zhang's touch. What if we're making it worse?" Carter took a deep breath, his eyes still fixed on the artifact. "We have to try. The Exizon may be the key. We need to understand how it's connected to this power." With a determined look, Carter stepped forward, the rest of the team following suit. The Exizon, sensing their approach, remained perfectly still, though its eyes never left them. As they neared the pedestal, the glowing energy from the artifact grew more intense, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with raw power. The statues lining the chamber began to move, their stone limbs creaking as they shifted into new positions. It was clear, something ancient was waking, something powerful. And then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled violently, and a deep, rumbling voice filled the chamber once again. "Your fate has already been sealed," the voice intoned. "You are not the first to seek this power. You will be the last." The energy in the chamber reached a fever pitch, and the walls of the temple seemed to warp and twist before their eyes. The artifact pulsed once more, and then everything went black. Suspense. Had the humans unlocked something they couldn't control? What was the true purpose of the artifact, and why was the galaxy's most powerful force now trying to destroy them? Was the Exizon truly a key to their survival, or was it a pawn in a much larger game? And more importantly, could they survive the consequences of their actions? The awakening. A force beyond control. The darkness engulfed them, oppressive and thick. The sudden silence was deafening. The air felt heavy, charged with a strange, unknown energy. For a moment, it was as if time itself had frozen. The ground beneath their feet ceased trembling, and even the Exizon had gone eerily still. Captain Carter's heartbeat echoed in his ears as he struggled to see through the inky blackness. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, the darkness receded, replaced by an intense light so bright that it almost blinded them. The once still statues had now shifted into new positions, and the chamber was no longer what it had been. The walls, previously covered with ancient symbols, now glowed with vibrant, shifting patterns, almost like a living map, pulsating with energy. "What in the world?" Morgan whispered, her voice shaking with awe and fear. Carter's eyes narrowed, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm, though he knew it would be of no use against whatever they were facing. The artifact had done something they couldn't fully comprehend. The air around them seemed to vibrate with a deep hum, and the sensation of being watched intensified. It was as if the temple itself was alive, conscious, and aware of their every move. The voice returned, louder, more powerful, and impossibly close. "Foolish mortals, you have awakened something that should have stayed forgotten." The voice resonated from all directions, so deep and powerful it felt like it was coming from the very core of the planet. It reverberated through their bones, sending chills down their spines. The hum in the air grew louder, a sound almost like a heartbeat, but far slower, as though the planet itself was alive, pulsing with dark energy. Dr. Zhang took a step back, his eyes wide with horror. This is not just an artifact. It's a prison, a containment. We've released something. Carter's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place, but the realization only deepened the danger. They had unknowingly broken a seal that had been in place for thousands, perhaps millions of years. Whatever they had unleashed, it wasn't just a relic or a tool. It was a force, a being, a power beyond their understanding. The artifact was a key, but it had unlocked something far more dangerous. The Xizen's growl echoed through the chamber as it took a cautious step forward. It was acting differently now, as if sensing the overwhelming presence in the air. It seemed to be communicating with the darkness, its eyes glowing brighter than before. But then, with a sudden movement, the creature froze. Its body went rigid, and a strange, unnatural energy seemed to flow from the artifact into the Xizen's form. "No, no," Carter shouted, his eyes widening in horror. "What's happening to it?" The Xizen began to change. Its massive frame trembled, its muscles twitching as though something inside it was being pulled, twisted, and manipulated by an unseen force. The creature's once violent aura began to shift into something more controlled, more purposeful, and that terrifying transformation only served to heighten Carter's fear. Then the voice spoke again, but this time it wasn't just a warning, it was a command. "You have freed me. You have broken the barrier." The ground trembled again, but this time the vibrations were different, more intense. The temple itself seemed to come alive, its walls contracting and expanding, like a living organism breathing. The air around them grew thick with dark energy, and the light from the artifact flickered like a dying flame. Carter's mind raced. Whatever this entity was, it was speaking directly to them now. It wasn't just an ancient artifact. It was a prison holding something far worse, something they had unknowingly set loose. Who are you?" Carter asked, his voice hoarse, though he could barely keep his fear from showing. The voice answered, each word dripping with an ancient malice. "I am the Warden, the eternal keeper of this world. And now, you are my guests, trapped in the prison of my making. Your fate was sealed the moment you touched the artifact." Carter's heart sank. He had always been a leader, always willing to make tough decisions for the sake of the mission. But now, it felt as though they were out of their depth. The artifact had not given them the power to control the Xizen. It had given them access to something much darker, something far more dangerous. And now, they had no way of stopping it. The Xizen roared, its eyes flickering between the humans and the now glowing artifact. The energy flowing from the artifact seemed to merge with the creature, turning it into something different. The once feral beast was becoming more controlled, more focused, but it was also becoming more powerful, more terrifying. Carter realized with a sinking feeling that they had unknowingly forged an alliance with a force they could not control. "This is a disaster," Morgan said, her voice trembling. "We've awakened something that can't be stopped. We're all doomed." Carter's eyes scanned the chamber, looking for an escape, a way to fight back. But the walls seemed to be closing in. The very air was charged with energy, and every step they took felt heavier. There was no way out. Not yet. "We need to figure out how to close this," Carter said, his voice firm. "We can't just leave it like this. We need to find a way to stop whatever's coming." Dr. Zhang nodded, but his expression was filled with doubt. "The Warden said it's a prison, Captain. If we can't stop this, the entire galaxy could be in danger." But it was too late. The voice spoke again, this time with a finality that made Carter's blood run cold. You cannot stop what you have awakened. The galaxy will fall, just as the others did. There is no escape. Suddenly, the walls of the temple began to crack, the energy in the air swirling into a vortex of dark, twisting power. The light from the artifact flared brighter, until it became almost blinding. And then, everything exploded into a blinding flash of light. Suspense. What had they truly awakened? Was the Exizon a weapon or a servant of something far greater? The fate of the galaxy seemed to hang in the balance as the very foundation of the temple began to collapse. Could Carter and his team find a way to close the prison they had opened, or were they doomed to witness the beginning of the end? The unleashing. A galaxy in peril. The explosion of light seemed to consume everything. For a moment, Captain Carter couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't even feel. The blinding flash of energy overwhelmed his senses, and for what seemed like an eternity, he was suspended in darkness. Then, as abruptly as it began, the light faded, leaving him gasping for air, his heart racing in his chest. Carter slowly opened his eyes. The temple was gone. The walls, the floor, the strange patterns of light, all had vanished. He found himself standing in an open, vast expanse. A sky filled with swirling, violent clouds above, casting an ominous glow that bathed everything in a sickly light. The ground beneath him was cracked, shattered, as if it had been torn apart by some cataclysmic force. His team stood in a similar daze, their expressions filled with confusion and fear. What happened? Morgan whispered, her voice distant, trembling. Carter's mind raced as he surveyed the desolation around them. The temple had disappeared. In its place was a barren, alien world, ravaged by some unseen disaster. The very air felt thick, toxic, as if the planet itself was dying. His thoughts quickly turned to the mission. Had they failed? Had they unleashed something far worse than they could ever have imagined? "It's the Warden," Dr. Zhang said quietly, as if reading his mind. "The entity we awakened. This is the result of freeing it." Carter's gaze hardened as he looked at his team. They had come here seeking knowledge, power, answers. They had found all that, and much more. The consequences of their actions were now painfully clear. The artifact wasn't just a tool, it was a beacon, a call to the Warden, an ancient malevolent force that had been imprisoned here for untold millennia. The Exizon, still standing beside them, let out a low growl. Its massive body was now still, but Carter noticed a distinct change in its demeanor. The once ferocious creature now appeared almost subdued, as though it had accepted its new role, its new purpose. It seemed to be waiting for something, as though attuned to the energy in the air, responding to the commands of the Warden that still echoed in Carter's mind. "What do we do now, Captain?" Morgan's voice broke through Carter's thoughts. Her eyes were wide with fear, and there was a tremor in her hands. He didn't have an answer. Not yet. The truth was, Carter had no idea how to fix this, how to reverse what they had done. All he knew was that the Warden had made its presence known, and they were now its prisoners, trapped in a world it controlled. As the seconds passed, the sky above began to change. The swirling clouds parted, revealing a massive structure in the distance, far larger than anything they had ever seen before. It was a dark, monolithic structure, towering over the ruined landscape. Its surface was smooth, metallic, and it seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, sending ripples through the very air. "That's it," John whispered, his voice full of dread. "That's where the Warden resides. Its power, its prison, it's all centered there." Carter's eyes narrowed. This was no accident. They had awakened something far greater than themselves, and now they had to deal with the consequences. The Exizon growled again, its eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. It seemed to sense something coming from the direction of the monolithic structure, something dangerous, something powerful. Carter could feel it too. The air had grown even more charged, the ground beneath their feet trembling in response to the growing energy. "We have to stop it," Carter said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We can't let it destroy everything." Dr. Zhang stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Captain, we don't even know what we're dealing with. The Warden isn't just some being. It's a force. We don't have the means to fight it." But Carter didn't have time for doubt. He knew the stakes. If they didn't act, the Warden's influence would spread, destroying not just this planet, but the entire galaxy. The Heisen, for all its power, had been a tool, a weapon in the Warden's arsenal. And now, it was free. And if the Warden had its way, it would turn the entire universe into its personal prison. "We have no choice," Carter said, his voice firm. "We've already opened the door. Now we need to find a way to close it before it's too late." Morgan nodded, her fear transforming into determination. "Then let's move out." The team began to move toward the dark, towering structure, their steps slow but purposeful. As they approached, the temperature seemed to drop even further, and the very air grew heavier with each step. Carter could feel the presence of the Warden in the back of his mind, like a dark shadow looming over them, watching their every move. It was as if the Warden was toying with them, savoring their fear, their uncertainty. As they neared the base of the structure, they could see that the walls were covered in intricate markings, symbols that seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. The door, the only way in, was an impenetrable barrier of solid metal, with no obvious way to open it. Carter pressed his hand against the surface, hoping for some sign, some way to enter, but the door remained unmoving. "Any ideas?" Carter asked, turning to Zhang. Zhang's eyes were wide with uncertainty. "It's like the door is locked by the Warden itself. We can't just force our way in. We'll need to find another way." But before they could formulate a plan, the ground beneath them began to shake once again. The Exisen let out a sharp cry, its body glowing with the same dark energy that had been emanating from the artifact. Carter's heart raced as he realized what was happening. The Warden was waking. The monolithic structure began to tremble as a massive energy field enveloped it, and the sky above darkened once more. The Warden was rising. Its power was growing, and it would soon be unstoppable. Suspense. The countdown had begun. Could Carter and his team find a way into the Warden's fortress before it was too late? Or would the force they had unleashed consume everything, wiping out the galaxy in its wake? And what role did the Exisen play in all of this? Was it an ally or an enemy? Time was running out. The final confrontation. A universe on the brink. The tremors in the ground grew more intense, each shake sending ripples through the shattered landscape. Carter felt the vibrations in his chest, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. He had known they were walking into the heart of the storm, but now it felt as if the storm was about to swallow them whole. The sky above darkened further, an unnatural twilight filling the air as the ominous energy surrounding the monolithic structure intensified. The Heisen growled low, its once passive stance now a dangerous one. It stood alert, every muscle rippling with tension as the air around it seemed to crackle. Carter's eyes scanned the structure ahead. Whatever the Warden was, it was beyond anything they had prepared for. The force it commanded, the power it exuded, was unlike anything the human race had ever faced. And yet, they had no choice. They had to face it, before the Warden's power consumed them all. Carter motioned for his team to stay close as they moved toward the imposing structure. The door, still sealed tight, loomed before them. They were running out of time. Each step they took brought them closer to the inevitable. Either they would find a way inside, or the Warden would rise and claim the galaxy as its own. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently, and a voice, deep and resonant, filled the air. It came not from any one direction, but seemed to surround them, coming from the very core of the planet itself. The voice was unmistakable, ancient, and filled with a dark authority. "You are too late," the voice boomed, sending a chill through Carter's bones. "The gate is already open. The end is nigh. The universe shall fall before me. Carter clenched his fists, his gaze hardening. He had known this day might come, but he hadn't anticipated it would happen so soon. The warden's power had only been building since they unleashed it, and now it was unstoppable. But there was a spark of hope. The Kaizen, the once deadly beast that had been under the warden's control, now stood differently. Its glowing eyes now focused, not with aggression, but with understanding. It seemed to sense something, its attention drawn to the sealed door. Carter knew in that moment that the Kaizen had become more than just a weapon. It was a key, a part of the warden's prison. And if they were going to survive, they needed to use the Kaizen's bond with the warden to their advantage. "Morgan, Zhang, get ready," Carter said, his voice low but firm. "We're going to have to trust the Kaizen. It's the only chance we've got." Morgan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You want to trust that thing?" "I don't have a choice," Carter replied, his gaze never leaving the Kaizen. "It's the only way in." The Kaizen moved toward the door, its massive form tensing as it approached. Carter and his team followed closely, their weapons raised, ready for whatever came next. The creature stopped before the sealed entry, its massive body still as a statue, its eyes glowing a deep, unnatural blue. A sudden, terrifying silence fell over them. It was as if the universe itself had held its breath, waiting for the next moment. The Kaizen let out a low growl, and the energy surrounding the door shifted. The pulsing light from the structure began to sync with the Kaizen's glow. Carter could feel the tension in the air, as the artifact they had uncovered began to respond to the Kaizen's presence. Then, with a deafening sound, the door slowly began to open, as though the warden itself had allowed them entrance. The ground trembled again, but this time, that Kaizen didn't move. Instead, it stood motionless, as if it had fulfilled its role and was now awaiting its fate. Carter didn't hesitate. He motioned for his team to enter the opening. They stepped forward into the darkness, weapons drawn, hearts racing. The temperature inside dropped dramatically, and the atmosphere was thick with dark energy. The walls were alive with ancient symbols that seemed to shift as they moved, the energy from the warden pressing in on all sides. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the structure, Carter felt the weight of the warden's presence grow heavier. It was everywhere. In the walls, in the air, in his thoughts. The voice of the warden, once distant, now seemed to surround them, its words cutting through the silence like a blade. "You cannot escape," the voice rumbled. "I will consume all. The galaxy is mine to command." The air around them rippled with power as the team moved forward. Carter knew they were running out of time. The warden was awakening, and the galaxy's fate rested on their shoulders. But the deeper they went, the more Carter realized something. This wasn't just a physical battle. The warden wasn't just a creature of flesh and bone. It was a being of energy, of consciousness, and it had the power to control not just the physical world, but their very minds. As they reached the heart of the structure, they saw it, a massive throne-like seat at the center of a vast chamber. The walls surrounding it were etched with symbols of power, and in the center of the seat was a pulsating orb of light, the source of the warden's energy. But the moment they stepped closer, the warden's voice echoed louder, its power flooding the room. "You dare challenge me?" The warden growled, its voice shaking the walls. "You are nothing but ants in my domain. You will bow, or you will perish." The orb began to glow brighter, and the air grew thick with a force that threatened to crush them. Carter's mind screamed for answers, for a way to stop this, but the only thing that came to his mind was a single word, a word they had already heard from the warden itself. Run. It was the only choice left. To fight would be suicide. The warden's power was overwhelming, and even with their combined strength, there was no way to defeat it. They had to escape, and fast. Carter's heart pounded as he turned to his team. "Fall back. Move," he shouted. But as they turned to flee, the doors slammed shut behind them. trapping them in the heart of the Warden's lair. Suspense. With the Warden's power closing in on them, would Carter and his team find a way out? Or had they unleashed a force too powerful to escape? The galaxy's fate now rested on their shoulders. But was it already too late to save it?